Emily's life was shattered the moment her husband Daniel kicked her out after she gave birth to triplets with dark skin, despite both of them being white. Left to raise her children alone, Emily struggled for years. But what neither of them knew was that a hidden family secret would emerge a decade later, leading to a shocking twist no one could have predicted. What was this secret? And how did it change everything? Also, please comment where you're listening from, and if you like stories like these, please subscribe to our channel. Let's begin. The sterile smell of antiseptic hung heavy in the air as Emily blinked against the blinding lights of the delivery room. Her body ached from the intensity of labor. But there was a brief, fleeting moment when all of that disappeared. She had just given birth to 3 beautiful babies, triplets. The thought alone should have been enough to fill her heart with boundless joy. But the air in the room was thick with tension. Emily had barely caught her breath, her mind spinning with the exhaustion of childbirth, when she saw it, the look on Daniel's face. He had been standing by her side, his hand clasping hers through the entire labor. She had felt his strength, his presence, every step of the way. But now, as the nurses cleaned and swaddled the babies, Daniel's expression shifted from awe to something much darker. His eyes, once filled with hope and excitement, turned cold. Emily followed his gaze, her own heart pounding in her chest, as she looked at the babies cradled in the nurse's arms. They were beautiful, tiny and perfect in every way, except for one thing: their skin. A deep, rich brown. Emily's breath caught in her throat, and the room spun for a moment. She blinked rapidly, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. How could this be? Both she and Daniel were white, their families both deeply rooted in generations of pale skin. How could their children be born with dark skin? Her mouth opened to say something, to explain or defend herself, even though she had no explanation, but the words never came. Instead, it was Daniel who broke the silence. His hand slipped away from hers, and the warmth of his touch disappeared. Without a word, he stepped back, his face tightening into a mask of disbelief. Emily reached for him, her voice trembling with uncertainty. "Daniel?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the soft cries of the newborns. He didn't respond. His eyes were glued to the babies, his lips pressed into a thin line. Emily watched in horror as her husband, the man she had shared everything with, turned on his heel and walked out of the room without so much as a glance back. The door swung shut behind him with a soft click, but to Emily it felt like the slamming of 1,000 doors. For a moment she couldn't move. Her body, still sore from the delivery, trembled. She felt as if a giant wave had swept her away, pulling her under, leaving her gasping for air. A nurse approached her with a gentle smile, cradling one of the babies in her arms. "Congratulations, Mrs. Harper. You have 3 beautiful babies." Emily forced a smile as the nurse placed the first baby in her arms, but inside her mind was a whirlwind. The nurse didn't seem to notice the dark skin, or if she did, she said nothing. But Emily couldn't stop thinking about it. How could this have happened? She glanced down at the tiny, wriggling infant in her arms. The baby's little fingers grasped at the air, searching for comfort, for warmth. Emily's heart softened for a moment as she looked into the baby's face, so innocent, so full of life. But as much as she wanted to hold on to that moment of peace, the storm in her mind was too strong. The fear, the confusion, the weight of Daniel's reaction, all of it came crashing down on her. She glanced towards the door where Daniel had vanished. Where had he gone? Would he come back? Tears welled up in her eyes, but she quickly blinked them away. Now wasn't the time to fall apart. She had 3 newborns who needed her, who relied on her for everything. The nurses continued to bustle around her, placing the other 2 babies into nearby bassinets. But all Emily could hear was the deafening silence left behind by Daniel's absence. She could still see the anger in his eyes, the way he had stared at the triplets as if they were strangers, as if they weren't his own flesh and blood. The door he'd walked out of felt like a chasm had opened between them, a rift she wasn't sure they could ever close. As she held her baby, A million questions swirled in her head. Could there have been a mix-up at the hospital? Was there some rare genetic explanation? The more she thought about it, the more the questions piled up, but no answers came. The only certainty was the look on Daniel's face when he saw the babies. That look of betrayal. The minutes dragged by, turning into hours, and there was still no sign of Daniel. Emily kept glancing at the door, hoping with each passing moment that he would return, that he would come to his senses and they would talk things through. But he never came back. In the quiet of the hospital room, Emily was left alone with her thoughts, her babies, and a gaping uncertainty about what would come next. All the happiness she had imagined, bringing their babies home, Daniel beaming with pride as he held them in his arms, was replaced by an overwhelming fear that her life, as she knew it, was falling apart. Little did she know, this was just the beginning of her journey. The sound of Daniel's heavy footsteps echoed in the hospital corridor long before Emily saw him. Her heart, which had been aching with worry since he'd left, skipped a beat as he reappeared. This was it, he was coming back to talk, to hold her hand like he had during the labor, to tell her that everything would be okay. She had convinced herself that, given time, they could figure it out. Surely they could make sense of what had happened. But the moment Daniel came into view, Emily's hope crumbled. He wasn't holding flowers or wearing the gentle expression she had yearned to see. Instead, his face was contorted with fury, and in each hand he clutched heavy duffel bags filled with her things. Without a word, Daniel walked right past the nurse's station and straight to the hospital entrance. Emily could hear the thudding sounds as he dumped her belongings on the cold, hard pavement outside the hospital doors. "What? What is he doing?" Emily whispered, confusion rippling through her. Her body tensed and a lump rose in her throat. She could barely move, sore from the delivery and emotionally shattered by Daniel's earlier disappearance. The nurses exchanged concerned glances, whispering among themselves, but they didn't intervene. Hospital staff moved around in quiet confusion as Daniel's anger intensified. A few security guards hovered at a distance, unsure if they should step in. Emily's heart raced as she watched Daniel through the window. His shoulders were rigid, his face red with fury as he tossed her bags carelessly, the contents spilling out onto the sidewalk. Panic gripped her chest. She wanted to scream, to call out to him, but the words stuck in her throat. Finally, Daniel turned and stormed back through the hospital doors. His footsteps were fast, determined, as he made his way toward her room. Emily's breath hitched. "Please, let him calm down. Let us talk it through." But when Daniel entered the room, there was no trace of the man she had fallen in love with. His eyes were dark, cold, and filled with something far more dangerous than anger, betrayal. "I know what you did, Emily," he hissed, venom dripping from every word. Emily's hands trembled as she tried to sit up in the hospital bed. Her body, still weak from childbirth, ached with every movement, but the pain in her heart was far worse. "Daniel, please," she started, but he cut her off with a sharp wave of his hand. "Don't." His voice was low and trembling with rage. "I can't believe you would do this to me. You think I'm stupid? Do you think I wouldn't figure it out?" Emily's heart pounded in her chest. She didn't understand what he was talking about. "Figure out what? I haven't done anything, Daniel. Please, let's just talk. Talk." Daniel's laugh was bitter and hollow. "Talk about what, Emily? How you tried to pass off another man's children as mine?" His voice rose, drawing the attention of passing nurses and visitors, their curious glances making the moment even more painful for Emily. She felt her face flush with humiliation. Her heart sank into her stomach as she realized the depth of Daniel's misunderstanding. "Daniel, no, you don't understand. I didn't." "I understand perfectly," he spat, his voice now shaking with fury. "You cheated on me, Emily. You lied to me, and now you expect me to just—" "What? Pretend these kids are mine? Do you think I'm blind?" The sharpness of his words cut through her like a blade. Emily couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Tears welled up in her eyes, blurring her vision as the enormity of his accusations hit her like a tidal wave. She hadn't cheated. She had no explanation for what had happened with the baby's skin color, but she knew she hadn't betrayed him. And yet, here he was accusing her of the worst. "Daniel, please," she whispered through the tears, her voice breaking. "I didn't do anything. You have to believe me." But Daniel's eyes were filled with disbelief and disdain. He took a step closer to the bed, his face inches from hers, and lowered his voice to a cold whisper. "You and those babies can rot in hell for all I care. You'll never set foot in our house again." Emily's breath hitched in her throat, her body frozen in shock. His words, so final, so cruel, left her speechless. The man she had once loved more than anything was now a stranger, someone who wanted nothing to do with her or their children. The betrayal cut deeper than any physical pain she had ever known. Daniel turned abruptly and marched towards the door, but Emily reached out, her voice trembling with desperation. "Daniel, wait! Please, don't leave me like this. We can figure this out. Don't just walk away." He paused for a brief moment, his back to her as if considering her words. For a fleeting second, she thought he might turn around, that the man she loved would come back to her. But instead, his voice came out cold and hard, without a trace of compassion. "I already have." And just like that, he was gone. The door closed with a soft click, but to Emily, it might as well have slammed shut like a prison gate. She stared at the empty doorway, her mind reeling. Her entire world had just crumbled in a matter of minutes. She couldn't stop the sobs that erupted from her chest, loud and uncontrollable. Tears streamed down her face as her mind raced with thoughts of what to do next. Where would she go? How would she take care of the triplets alone? She had no money, no home, no one left to help her. And Daniel, the man who should have been there, who should have stood by her, had walked away without a second thought. Emily wrapped her arms around herself, her body trembling as the weight of her new reality crashed down on her. She had been left with nothing but 3 newborn babies, and the crushing emptiness where her marriage once was. The love that had once filled her life was now replaced by fear, confusion, and loneliness. Outside the hospital, the last of Emily's belongings were scattered on the pavement, abandoned just like her. The staff had gathered near the entrance, whispering amongst themselves, unsure how to help. But Emily knew there was no one left who could help her now. For the first time, she was truly alone. Emily sat alone in the cold hospital room, her eyes glazed over with exhaustion and grief. Her heart ached in a way she had never felt before, the weight of Daniel's abandonment pressing down on her chest, making it hard to breathe. The triplets lay quietly in their bassinets nearby, their soft breaths the only sound breaking the eerie silence. Her mind was spinning, trapped in an endless loop of unanswered questions and overwhelming despair. With trembling fingers, she picked up her phone, scrolling through her contacts. Her vision blurred with tears as she paused over a single name, Mom. Emily's hand hovered over the screen. Calling her mother felt like admitting defeat, like acknowledging that she was no longer in control of her own life. But she had no choice. What else could she do? She tapped the name, her breath catching in her throat as the phone began to ring. Each second felt like an eternity. When the call connected, Emily barely managed to get out the words. "Mom, I need you," her voice broke, the tears she had been holding back finally spilling down her cheeks. There was a brief pause, but when Margaret's voice came through the phone, it was full of urgency and concern. "Emily, what's wrong? Are you okay?" Emily couldn't hold it together any longer. She sobbed uncontrollably, the story spilling out in broken pieces. How Daniel had left her, the accusations, the triplets, the bags he had dumped outside. Every word tore through her like a fresh wound. She could hardly believe she was living it, let alone saying it out loud. Without hesitation, Margaret responded, "I'm coming right now. Don't worry, honey. I'll take care of everything." Emily let out a shaky breath. Mom would fix this. Somehow, her mother always knew how to make things better, even when the world was falling apart. 2 hours later, Margaret burst through the hospital doors, her face etched with worry. She found Emily curled up in the hospital bed, her face pale and tear-streaked. The sight of her daughter so broken ignited something fierce in Margaret. She rushed to Emily's side, wrapping her arms around her. "I'm here, sweetheart. I'm here." Emily sobbed into her mother's shoulder, her body shaking with the release of all the pain she had been holding inside. For the first time since the nightmare had begun, she felt a glimmer of relief. She didn't have to face this alone anymore. After a few minutes, Margaret pulled back, brushing Emily's hair from her face. "We'll get through this, okay? No matter what, I'm here for you and the babies." Emily nodded, but inside she still felt the gaping hole left by Daniel's absence. How could he have done this to her? To their children? Margaret wasted no time. She turned to the nurses asking for assistance with Emily's discharge and began gathering up what was left of Emily's things. As she packed the last of Emily's belongings into her car, she made sure the nurses had everything ready for the babies as well. She was a force of nature, moving with efficiency and purpose, not allowing herself to dwell on the pain she saw in her daughter's eyes. Once everything was packed, Margaret helped Emily into the passenger seat and carefully secured the triplets in their car seats. It was a quiet drive back to Margaret's house, but the silence wasn't uncomfortable. Emily's tears had stopped, though her heart was still heavy, and she could feel the depth of her mother's love with every mile they traveled. At home, Margaret immediately slipped into action. Her cozy, modest house became a sanctuary for Emily and the triplets. Margaret set up a small crib in her bedroom for the babies, stocked the fridge with homemade meals, and transformed the living room into a comforting space where Emily could rest. Margaret wasn't just giving Emily shelter, she was giving her the love and support Emily so desperately needed. For the next few weeks, Margaret was Emily's anchor in the storm. She worked tirelessly, balancing the needs of the newborns with caring for her daughter. In those first few difficult days, Emily couldn't even bring herself to hold the babies for long. Her arms felt weak, her mind cloudy with exhaustion, and the haunting memories of Daniel's betrayal. The physical pain from the delivery still lingered, but the emotional pain was unbearable. Margaret noticed. She could see the cracks in Emily's armor, the way her daughter flinched at the sound of the babies crying, the way she stared off into the distance, lost in her thoughts. Margaret made it her mission to keep Emily fed, rested, and emotionally supported. Every time Emily seemed on the verge of breaking down, Margaret was there with a warm hug, a hot cup of tea, or a soothing word. But no matter how hard Margaret worked, Emily's sadness seemed to deepen with each passing day. At night, when the house was quiet and the triplets were finally asleep, Emily would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, the weight of everything crushing her. She replayed the moment Daniel left her over and over again. His words haunted her dreams. How had the color of her baby's skin destroyed their marriage? Every time she looked at the triplets, their beautiful dark skin reminded her of the life she had lost, the love that had slipped through her fingers. She couldn't understand it. She loved her babies fiercely, but the shadow of Daniel's anger loomed over her, filling her with guilt and confusion. She confided in her mother late one night as they sat together in the dimly lit living room. The triplets were finally asleep, their soft breathing barely audible from the bedroom. Emily clutched her mug of tea tightly, her hands trembling as she spoke. "I don't understand, Mom. Why did this happen? Why did Daniel hate them so much? It's just their skin. How could that be enough to tear us apart?" Margaret sighed, setting her cup down on the table. She reached over and squeezed Emily's hand gently. "People fear what they don't understand, Emily. And sometimes that fear turns into anger. But this wasn't your fault, Daniel's reaction. That's on him, not you." Emily wiped away a tear, but her heart still ached. "I thought he loved me enough to stay, to at least talk to me. I thought we were stronger than this." Margaret pulled her daughter into a warm embrace, gently rocking her like she had when Emily was a child. "You are strong, sweetheart. You're stronger than you know, and you'll get through this. You have to, for those babies. They need you now more than ever." Emily knew her mother was right. The triplets needed her. They were her world now. But how could she be strong when she felt so broken inside? As the weeks turned into months, Emily's focus slowly shifted. The dark cloud of Daniel's betrayal still hovered in the background, but her children became her priority. Margaret's endless support helped pull her out of the depths of her despair. Little by little, Emily found herself spending more time with the babies, holding them longer, bonding with them. Even if it still hurt to think about how they had come into this world under such painful circumstances. Her love for her children began to grow stronger than the grief she carried. The triplets were her lifeline now, and though her heart still ached from what Daniel had done, she vowed to be the mother they deserved. She may have lost her husband, but she wouldn't lose herself. Not for them. The first few months after moving in with her mother, Margaret, had been a whirlwind of emotions for Emily. She was slowly adjusting to life without Daniel, and with her mother's constant support, she started to regain some semblance of normalcy. Her days were a blur of changing diapers, feeding the triplets, and trying to stay afloat emotionally. But as time passed, she found a strength she didn't know she had. When the triplets turned 1, Emily knew she had to take the next step. She needed to provide for them, to build a future for herself and her children. With Margaret's encouragement, she dusted off her resume and began applying for jobs. It wasn't easy. The stigma of being a single mother, the constant worry about her children, and the lingering heartbreak from Daniel's betrayal weighed heavily on her. But Emily persevered. After weeks of searching, she finally landed a job as a secretary at a local law firm. It wasn't her dream job, but it was steady, and it paid enough to support her family. Slowly, she began to rebuild. She saved every penny, budgeting carefully, and even managed to find a small apartment close to work. Margaret would continue to help care for the triplets during the day, but now Emily had a chance to stand on her own feet again. For the first time in what felt like forever, Emily allowed herself to breathe. But just when she thought life was beginning to look up, a dark shadow reappeared. It started one chilly autumn morning. Emily stepped outside her apartment, the crisp air biting at her cheeks, and reached into the mailbox. Among the usual bills and advertisements was a plain white envelope with no return address. She frowned, her fingers lingering on the unfamiliar letter. Curious, she tore it open as she walked back inside. The words, hastily scrawled in uneven handwriting, hit her like a punch to the gut. "I know what you did. You'll pay for it." Emily's heart skipped a beat. Her mind raced back to the painful memories of Daniel's accusations. Was this from him? Had he found her? She hadn't heard from him since the day he stormed out of the hospital. As far as she knew, he had vanished without a trace. Shaking off the unease, she crumpled the letter and tossed it in the trash. Maybe it was a prank, she thought. Maybe it was nothing. But deep down, something didn't feel right. The next few weeks passed uneventfully, and Emily almost forgot about the strange letter. Work was keeping her busy, and the triplets were growing more energetic by the day. But then another envelope arrived, this one with the same cold, anonymous look. Emily's hands trembled as she opened it, already dreading what was inside. "Cheater, you ruined everything. Now it's your turn to suffer." Emily's stomach lurched. The words were harsher, more personal. It wasn't a prank. She was sure of it now. Someone knew. Someone was watching her. From that day forward, the letters became a terrifying part of Emily's life. Every few days, another envelope would appear in her mailbox, the messages becoming more graphic, more threatening. Whoever was sending them promised revenge for her supposed infidelity, but the notes also began describing in disturbing detail how they would hurt her. The letters spoke of breaking into her home, of making her suffer for her betrayal. One letter even mentioned the triplets. Emily's blood ran cold as she read that letter. "They'll never see their mother again if you don't stop pretending to be innocent." Her hands shook violently as she stuffed the note back into the envelope. Fear like she had never known before wrapped itself around her heart. This wasn't just about her anymore. Her children were in danger. Emily's first instinct was to call Margaret. "Mom, I don't know what to do," she said, her voice trembling with fear as she explained the situation. "I think it's Daniel. He's found us. He's threatening me and the kids. I can't let him hurt them." Margaret's voice was calm, but Emily could hear the concern beneath it. "You need to go to the police, Emily. This isn't something you can handle on your own. I'll take care of the kids while you file a report. We'll figure this out together." Reluctantly, Emily agreed. The next morning she went to the local police station and showed them the letters. The officer on duty took her statement seriously, flipping through the notes with a furrowed brow. But after listening to her story, he shook his head. "We'll do what we can to look into this, Ms. Harper," the officer said, his voice steady but laced with caution. "But without a name or a clear suspect, it's going to be difficult to track this person down." Emily's heart sank. "But it's Daniel, I'm sure of it. He's my ex-husband. He's the only one who would." "Do you have any idea where he is now?" the officer asked, pen poised to write down her answer. "No, I haven't heard from him since the day I gave birth," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. The officer nodded. "We'll add his name to the investigation, but if he's keeping a low profile, it may take time to find him. We'll keep an eye on things, but I suggest you take precautions at home. Change your locks, install security cameras if you can afford it. In the meantime, keep us updated if anything else happens." Emily left the station feeling more helpless than before. The police couldn't protect her, not really. She was on her own. The days passed, and though Emily tried to go about her life as usual, fear lingered in every corner of her mind. She followed the officer's advice and changed the locks on her apartment door, but it did little to ease her anxiety. Every time she opened the mailbox, her stomach churned, dreading the sight of another letter. And they kept coming. Each note was more terrifying than the last. One letter described how the sender would sneak into her house at night while she slept. Another threatened to take the children away from her forever. Emily became hypervigilant, checking the windows and doors multiple times a day, never leaving the triplets out of her sight. Margaret did her best to reassure her, but even she was beginning to show signs of worry. "We'll get through this," Margaret would say, holding Emily's hand whenever she saw her daughter trembling. "We have to stay strong for the kids." But Emily couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. She started noticing strange things, small details that made her question her own sanity. A door that was left slightly ajar when she was sure she had closed it. A chair moved in the living room. Footsteps in the hallway at night, when the house should have been silent. One night, after putting the triplets to bed, Emily found a letter lying on her pillow. Her heart stopped. Whoever it was had been inside her home. She hadn't seen anyone, hadn't heard a thing. Her body shook as she read the note. "You can't hide from me. I'm always watching." Terror gripped her. What if Daniel was already in the house? What if he was just waiting for the right moment? Emily's once peaceful apartment had become a prison of paranoia. Every noise at night jolted her awake, her heart pounding as she rushed to check on the triplets. She installed an alarm system and even asked her neighbors to keep an eye out for anything suspicious. But the letters kept coming, and the sense of dread only grew stronger. The police continued their investigation, but they had no leads. Daniel had vanished, and without concrete evidence, there was little they could do. Emily's mind was unraveling. She couldn't live like this anymore, constantly looking over her shoulder, fearing for her life and the safety of her children. She had worked so hard to rebuild her life, but now it felt like everything was slipping through her fingers. Something had to give. 5 years had passed since Daniel had vanished from Emily's life, but the shadow of his presence never truly left. Each day felt like walking on a tightrope, balancing between the joy of watching her children grow and the constant fear that one day Daniel would return. And though Emily had done everything in her power to move forward, her past refused to stay buried. The letters had been terrifying enough, but when she found the most recent note inside her home, something broke inside her. The familiar scrawl, filled with venom, stared up at her from the kitchen counter. "I'm closer than you think." Emily's blood ran cold. She had checked every lock, secured every window, and yet he had found a way in. Her hands trembled as she read the note again, the words blurring in her vision. Daniel had been inside her home. He had breached the one place that had always felt safe, and now nowhere felt secure. She clutched the note tightly, her mind racing. How long had he been watching? How close was he? The thought that he could walk through the door at any moment, that he might have even been lurking while she slept, sent shivers down her spine. She couldn't keep living like this, always looking over her shoulder, jumping at every noise, never knowing when the next threat might come. And then came the final straw, the moment that shook her to her core. It was a typical Monday afternoon when Emily went to pick up the triplets from school. The day had been quiet, unnervingly so. She was preoccupied, her thoughts spinning around the note she'd found that morning, trying to figure out her next move. As the bell rang and the children poured out of the school gates, Emily saw one of her sons, Jason, running toward her, his face pale and troubled. He clutched something in his small hand, and the moment he reached her, he held it up. "Mom, a man gave me this," Jason said, his voice tinged with confusion and fear. Emily froze, her eyes widening as she recognized the familiar white envelope. Her heart thundered in her chest. "What man, sweetie? Where did he go?" "I don't know. He was standing by the fence," Jason replied, looking over his shoulder as if expecting the man to still be there. "He told me to give it to you." Emily's hands shook as she slowly opened the envelope, her mind screaming with dread. The note inside was short, but it was enough to send her world spinning. "You can't protect them forever," she gasped, her knees nearly buckling as she stared at the words. This wasn't just about her anymore. Daniel had come for her children. He had crossed a line that she couldn't ignore. Her vision blurred with panic as she pulled Jason and his siblings close, her heart pounding so loudly it drowned out all other sounds. The schoolyard felt suffocating, and everywhere she looked, she imagined Daniel lurking in the shadows. How long had he been watching? How had he gotten so close to the children without her knowing? Her thoughts raced, a whirlwind of fear and urgency. "We need to go," she muttered, more to herself than to the kids. Her arms tightened around them as she hurried them toward the car, her eyes darting to every corner, every face that passed. She no longer trusted anyone around her. The world suddenly felt unsafe, every stranger a potential threat. That night, after getting the children to bed, Emily sat at the kitchen table, staring at the note for hours. She had tried to be strong. For years she had fought to keep her life together, to provide a sense of normalcy for her children. But it was no longer just her safety at stake, it was their lives. The thought of what Daniel might do to them, of how he could have hurt Jason that afternoon, filled her with a deep, gnawing dread. She had been a fool to think she could handle this on her own. She couldn't take any more chances. Margaret sat across from her, watching her daughter with a mix of concern and determination. "Emily, we've been running from this long enough. It's time to go. You and the kids deserve better than this. He'll keep coming, and you can't keep looking over your shoulder forever." Emily's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. She knew her mother was right. She had tried everything, changing the locks, installing cameras, even reporting Daniel to the police. But it hadn't been enough. Daniel was always one step ahead. Leaving wouldn't be easy. She had built a life here, finally earning a promotion at work after years of hard labor. The triplets were doing well in school, and they had friends, routines, a sense of stability that Emily had fought so hard to give them. But none of that mattered if they weren't safe. Emily sighed heavily, wiping the tears from her eyes. "We'll have to move far away, Mom, somewhere he won't find us." Margaret nodded, her face filled with resolve. "I'll be with you every step of the way. We'll start fresh. He won't be able to hurt you or the kids again." That night, Emily made the toughest decision of her life. She would leave everything behind, her job, her home, the life she had worked so hard to build. She couldn't risk another day with Daniel lurking in the shadows, waiting for his moment to strike. The following week was a blur of activity. Emily and Margaret moved quickly, packing up their belongings while keeping up the appearance of normalcy. Emily didn't want to tip Daniel off. She didn't know how closely he was watching, or if he had someone spying on her. Every day she felt his invisible presence, suffocating her. She handed in her resignation at work, making up a story about family troubles and needing to relocate. Her boss, though surprised, was understanding, and Emily felt a wave of relief wash over her. There was no going back now. The triplets, now 5, didn't fully understand why they were leaving. They didn't know the depth of the danger that surrounded them, and for that, Emily was grateful. She didn't want them to grow up in fear. All they knew was that they were moving to a new city, far away, where they could have a fresh start. As the final boxes were packed into the car, Emily stood in the empty apartment, her heart heavy with a mix of sadness and fear. She had tried so hard to make this place a home, but it was no longer safe, and staying any longer could cost her everything. Margaret placed a reassuring hand on Emily's shoulder. "This is the right thing to do," she said softly. "We'll find a new place, a better one, a place where he can never reach you again." Emily nodded, though her chest tightened with anxiety. I can't believe it's come to this. I worked so hard for this life, and now I have to leave it all behind because of him." Margaret squeezed her hand. "You're doing what's best for the kids. That's all that matters. We'll rebuild, just like we did before." And so, they left. Emily and Margaret drove through the night, the car packed with everything they could fit, the triplets asleep in the back seat. As the city lights faded in the rearview mirror, Emily felt a sense of both loss and hope. She was leaving behind everything she had known, but she was also taking the first step toward a future where she could finally feel safe. They drove for hours, crossing state lines, heading to a place where Daniel wouldn't be able to find them. Emily had chosen a small town far enough away that it felt like starting over. No one would know her there. No one would know her story. She could disappear and build a new life for her children. By the time they reached their new city, the sun was rising on the horizon. Emily looked at her children, still fast asleep, and whispered to herself, "We're safe now." But even as she said it, a small part of her wondered, would they ever truly be free? Years had passed since Emily had fled the life she had built, running from the ghost of Daniel and the terror he had instilled in her heart. In that time, she had done everything in her power to ensure the safety and happiness of her children. The new city had become their home, a sanctuary far removed from the horrors of their past. With Margaret's unwavering support, Emily had managed to find a steady job, enroll the triplets in a good school, and even carve out a circle of trusted friends. Life, for the first time in years, felt peaceful. The triplets had grown into bright, curious 10-year-olds, full of energy and joy. Their laughter filled the house, and their bond with Emily was as strong as ever. Though the shadow of their father still occasionally lingered in Emily's mind, Daniel had remained absent. His letters and threats had ceased the moment they moved away, and as the years went by, Emily allowed herself to believe that he was finally gone for good. The silence gave her room to breathe again. Today was a special day, the triplets' 10th birthday. The house was filled with the sweet scent of freshly baked cake, and colorful decorations adorned the living room. Balloons bobbed gently in the air, their bright colors a reflection of the joy Emily felt seeing her children so happy. Margaret was busy setting out plates and cups, humming softly as she worked. The triplets gathered around the table, excitedly talking about the gifts they had just unwrapped. Emily's heart swelled with pride as she watched them. Jason, Anna, and Leo, each one of them uniquely wonderful, each one a reminder of how far they had come. Their laughter filled the room, and for the first time in a long time, Emily felt a sense of contentment. The fear, the anxiety, the nightmares, they had all faded, leaving her with the simple joy of motherhood. As Emily cut the cake and handed out slices, she couldn't help but marvel at how much they had grown. We made it, she thought to herself, a soft smile playing on her lips. We're finally free. But just as the children began digging into their cake, the front door swung open with a loud creak. Emily's heart skipped a beat, her body tensing instantly. She had become so used to feeling safe that the unexpected intrusion hit her like a wave of ice-cold water. She spun around, her eyes locking on the figure standing in the doorway. Her blood ran cold. There, standing at the threshold, was Daniel. His appearance was a far cry from the man she remembered. He looked worn, disheveled, like someone who had been through years of hardship. His face was pale, lined with regret, his clothes hanging loosely on his frame. But it wasn't his appearance that stopped Emily's heart. It was the look in his eyes. They were filled with a sorrow she had never seen before. For a moment, time stood still. The room that had been filled with laughter and joy was now suffocatingly silent. The triplets, sensing the shift in the atmosphere, stopped eating and looked up at the strange man in the doorway. They had never seen Daniel before, but something in Emily's body language made them instinctively uneasy. Emily's throat tightened, her mind racing. How did he find us? She had taken every precaution, every step to ensure they would never cross paths again. And yet, here he was, standing in her home on the most important day of their lives. Daniel's voice was weak when he finally spoke, breaking the silence that had gripped the room. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice trembling. "I know I shouldn't be here, but I had to come. I had to see you all." Emily's chest tightened, anger and fear bubbling up inside her. Sorry? After everything he had done? After all the years of terrorizing her, of putting her children's lives in danger, of robbing her of peace? Sorry wasn't enough. Her instinct was to throw him out, to protect her children from the man who had caused them so much pain, even if they didn't know it. But she couldn't move. The shock of seeing him again after so many years had frozen her in place. Daniel's eyes flicked to the triplets, lingering on each of them in turn. His gaze softened as he took them in, their height, their curious faces, their dark skin. There was a look of recognition there, a flicker of something paternal, but also a deep, consuming guilt. "I want to make things right," Daniel continued, his voice breaking. "I know I was wrong. I know I hurt you, all of you. But I've changed, please. Let me explain." Emily's heart pounded in her chest, fury battling with the pain of the past. She clenched her fists, forcing herself to take slow, steady breaths. She couldn't afford to lose control, not in front of the children. "You don't get to just show up here after everything you've done," Emily finally managed, her voice low and trembling with emotion. "You don't get to walk back into our lives and expect forgiveness." The triplets exchanged glances, clearly confused and uneasy. They didn't know who this man was, but they could sense the tension radiating from their mother. Daniel took a step forward, but Emily instinctively moved in front of the children, shielding them from him. Her body trembled with a mix of fear and anger, memories of the past flashing through her mind, his abandonment at the hospital, the cruel notes, the threats that had haunted her for years. "I'm not the same person I was," Daniel said, his voice desperate. "I was angry. I was lost. I didn't know how to handle what happened. But I've had time to think. I've had time to realize how wrong I was. I want to make amends. I want to be part of their lives." The triplets' eyes widened, understanding dawning on them. Jason, the eldest by a few minutes, looked up at Emily, his voice quiet but firm. "Mom, who is he?" Emily's heart broke at the question. How could she explain the complexity of the situation to her children? How could she tell them that the man standing in front of them, the man who had hurt her so deeply, was their father? She had spent their entire lives protecting them from this truth, shielding them from the ugliness of her past. But now, it was standing in her living room, staring them all in the face. Emily turned back to Daniel, her eyes filled with a fierce determination. She wasn't the same scared woman he had left behind all those years ago. She had fought for her children, fought for their safety and their happiness. And now, she would fight to protect them from him. You don't deserve to be a part of their lives, Emily said, her voice cold. You walked out on us, Daniel. You left me in the hospital, abandoned your own children, and then you tormented me for years. You terrorized me with threats and letters. I had to uproot my entire life to get away from you. You don't just get to walk back in and ask for forgiveness. Daniel's eyes filled with tears, but Emily didn't waver. She had to be strong, not just for herself, but for the children standing behind her, watching every word she said. I know, Daniel whispered. I know I don't deserve it, but please, just hear me out. Emily shook her head, her voice trembling with emotion. There's nothing left to say. You don't belong in our lives anymore. Daniel's shoulders slumped, the weight of his guilt and regret crushing him. He took a step back, his gaze lingering on the triplets one last time. I wanted to see them, to see what I lost. Emily's heart ached, but she remained resolute. What you lost was your own doing. With that, Daniel turned and walked out of the house, the door closing softly behind him. Emily stood there for a long moment, her heart racing, her emotions swirling. The children were quiet, sensing the gravity of the moment. Jason looked up at her again, his young face filled with confusion. Mom, was that our dad? Emily knelt down, pulling all three of them into a tight embrace. Yes, she whispered, her voice breaking. But he's not part of our lives anymore. You have me, and that's all you need. As she held her children close, Emily felt a sense of finality. Daniel's return had shaken her, but she knew one thing for certain: her life, their life, would continue without him. She had fought for too long to let him disrupt the peace she had built. She had chosen her family, and in that moment, she knew she had made the right decision. Emily stood in the doorway of her small home, her mind reeling from the words Daniel had just uttered. The children were asleep, and the house, usually a place of warmth and safety, felt eerily quiet. Daniel stood before her, disheveled and broken, his eyes pleading for understanding. But what he had just revealed was too overwhelming for her to process. Her body felt heavy, as though all the strength she had built over the years was slowly being drained away. The silence between them stretched on, thick with tension. Emily could barely bring herself to speak, but the burning need for answers finally broke through. What did you just say? Emily's voice was barely a whisper, the shock rendering her almost voiceless. She stared at Daniel, her heart pounding in her chest. Had he always known? Had he carried this secret with him all these years? Daniel looked down, unable to meet her gaze, his hands fidgeting nervously. He took a deep breath, as though preparing himself for the weight of his confession. When he spoke again, his voice was thick with regret. I knew the triplets were mine, Emily, he began, his tone low and trembling. I knew from the moment they were born. Emily's stomach twisted. She felt nauseous, her mind racing back to the day she gave birth, the moment Daniel had looked at their children, seen their dark skin, and walked out of the hospital room without a word. All this time she had believed that Daniel truly thought she had cheated, that the baby's appearance had torn their marriage apart. But now everything was unraveling. Then why? Why did you accuse me of cheating? Why did you leave me, Daniel? Emily's voice cracked, the hurt she had buried for so long resurfacing with a vengeance. Daniel squeezed his eyes shut, guilt etched into every line of his face. I used it as an excuse, he admitted, his words coming out in a broken rush. When the triplets were born, I was shocked, yes, but not because I didn't know they were mine. It was because seeing them reminded me of a secret I had been carrying my whole life. A secret my mother kept hidden. He paused, glancing at Emily, his expression one of deep remorse. My mother had an affair when she was young with a black man. It happened before she met my father. She was terrified, Emily. She was scared that her mistake would come to light, that the world would find out. But when I was born, I looked white. I looked like my father. And so she took the secret to her grave. She never told anyone, until the day the triplets were born. Emily felt the floor shift beneath her. She stumbled slightly, gripping the back of a chair to steady herself. It all made sense now. The triplets' skin color wasn't the result of infidelity. It was a genetic inheritance, a dormant secret from Daniel's mother that had revealed itself in the next generation. And Daniel had known. He had known all along. "Your mother told you," Emily repeated, her voice hollow. She stared at him, wide-eyed, as though seeing him for the first time. "And you still left?" Daniel nodded, tears welling up in his eyes. "She told me right after I stormed out of the delivery room. When I saw the triplets, I panicked. I couldn't explain it. I didn't understand. But when I confronted my mother, she broke down. She told me the truth, that I had black ancestry, that the triplets were a reflection of that. And in that moment, I could have chosen to stand by you, Emily. I could have been honest, told you everything, and worked through it." His voice cracked with emotion, and for the first time Emily saw the depth of his pain. But it wasn't enough to erase the years of suffering he had caused her. "Instead, I used it as an excuse," Daniel continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "I was angry, confused, and I saw it as my way out. I blamed you, knowing it wasn't your fault. I wanted to escape the shame, the responsibility. So I left. I left you alone with the children, and I stole our savings because I thought I could start over. I thought I could build a new life without the weight of that secret." Emily's breath hitched in her throat, her heart breaking all over again. She had spent years thinking she had done something wrong, believing she was the cause of their marriage's collapse. But Daniel had known the truth all along, and he had chosen to walk away, leaving her to pick up the pieces of their shattered life. "How could you do that to me?" Emily's voice trembled with fury and hurt. "I was your wife, Daniel. I begged you to stay. I had just given birth to our children, your children, and you left us." Daniel wiped at his eyes, his voice shaking as he spoke. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I know I've done horrible things, and I've spent years regretting it. After I left, my life fell apart. The woman I ran away with, she only cared about the money, and when it ran out, she dumped me. I had nothing, Emily. I lost everything. And when I saw how well you were doing without me..." He trailed off, his voice thick with emotion. "That's when the jealousy set in," Daniel confessed, his eyes filled with shame. "I couldn't stand the thought of you moving on without me, of you building a life without me. So I started sending the notes, trying to scare you, trying to make you feel like you couldn't be happy without me. It was wrong, it was cruel, and I hate myself for it." Emily's body trembled as she listened to his words. The notes, the cruel, threatening letters that had haunted her for years, they had been born out of Daniel's jealousy and spite. He had watched her rebuild her life from the shadows, and instead of supporting her, he had tried to tear her down. "You tried to destroy me," Emily whispered, tears brimming in her eyes. "You stole everything from me, and then you tried to take away the peace I fought so hard to find." Daniel hung his head, silent. His guilt was palpable, but Emily wasn't sure if it was enough to heal the wounds he had caused. The room was still, save for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the distant sounds of the children sleeping upstairs. Emily could feel the weight of everything Daniel had confessed pressing down on her, crushing her beneath the enormity of the truth. Part of her wanted to scream, to lash out at him for everything he had done. But another part of her, a quieter part, was tired. Tired of fighting, tired of carrying the burden of Daniel's mistakes. "Why are you here now?" Emily asked, her voice barely audible. "Why come back after all these years?" Daniel looked up, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Because I've spent the last decade regretting what I did. Every day, I've thought about you, about the children, and about how much I hurt you. I thought I could live with my decision, but I can't. I've lost everything, Emily, and now I just want to make things right." Emily shook her head, the pain in her chest threatening to consume her. "You can't fix this, Daniel. You can't undo what you did." "I know," Daniel whispered, his voice thick with sorrow. "But I want to try. I want to be part of their lives. I want to be their father." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with expectation. Emily's heart ached at the thought, but she knew deep down that she had already made her decision. "They have a father," Emily said softly, her voice steady but full of finality. "It's just not you." Daniel's face crumpled, the last of his hope slipping away. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. Instead, he nodded, his eyes filled with regret. Emily took a deep breath, the weight of the years finally lifting from her shoulders. "I've spent too long letting you control my life, Daniel. It's time for me to move on, for good." With that, Emily turned away, leaving Daniel standing alone in the doorway of the home he would never be a part of. She didn't look back as she walked toward the stairs, her heart pounding in her chest. But she knew this was the final chapter in their story. And for the first time in years, Emily felt free. Emily stood in the dimly lit living room, her hands trembling, not from fear this time, but from anger, pure righteous anger. Tears welled up in her eyes as she stared at Daniel, who stood before her with a pleading look on his face. But these weren't tears of sadness or regret. For the first time, they were born from the fury that had been simmering deep within her for years. Daniel's apologies filled the air, weak and hollow. He begged for forgiveness, his voice cracking with desperation, but every word he uttered only fueled the fire that raged inside Emily. How dare he stand there, asking for absolution after everything he had done? After the lies, the abandonment, the cruelty? Her mind spun as the memories rushed back like a tidal wave. The pain of being left alone in that hospital room, the crushing weight of his accusations, the fear she had lived with for years as the threatening notes piled up, each one more chilling than the last. Emily had been strong for so long, holding herself together for the sake of her children, but now she felt her strength building in a new way. She had endured enough. "Forgive you?" Emily's voice trembled, not with weakness, but with the barely contained rage that had been festering beneath the surface for too long. She took a step closer to him, her eyes blazing. "You want me to forgive you after everything you've put me through? After you abandoned me and your children when we needed you the most? After you stole from me and left me with nothing?" Daniel opened his mouth to speak, but Emily cut him off, her voice growing louder, more powerful with each word. "You didn't just leave, Daniel. You left me in the worst possible moment of my life. I had just given birth to our children. I was scared, I was vulnerable, and you didn't care. You walked out. You left me to raise 3 newborns on my own, and then, as if that wasn't enough, you drained our bank account. Money I had saved for our future, for our children. You stole it, just like you stole years of my life." Her voice cracked with emotion, but she refused to let herself cry. No, not in front of him. He didn't deserve to see her tears. He didn't deserve to know the depth of the pain he had caused. Daniel's eyes filled with tears of his own, but Emily felt no sympathy. His remorse came too late, far too late, to erase the scars he had left on her heart. "I was wrong, Emily," Daniel choked out, his voice shaking with desperation. "I know I made horrible mistakes. I was lost. I was scared. I didn't know how to handle everything. But I've changed. Please, just give me a chance to make it right." Emily laughed, a bitter, hollow sound that echoed in the room. "Make it right? You want to make it right?" She shook her head, her jaw tightening as she clenched her fists at her sides. "Do you have any idea what I went through because of you? Because of your selfishness? I had to uproot my entire life. I moved to a different city, started over with nothing, just so I could protect our children from you. And what did you do in return? You sent me threats. You terrorized me for years, Daniel. You tried to make me afraid, to break me." Emily's chest heaved with emotion, the rage she had bottled up for so long finally breaking free. She was done hiding it. She was done letting him control her life. Daniel's voice grew smaller, almost pleading. "I didn't know how to handle it. I was jealous. I hated seeing you happy without me." "You didn't hate seeing me happy, Daniel," Emily snapped, cutting him off once more. "You hated seeing that I didn't need you, that I could survive, that I could thrive without you. You hated that I wasn't broken by you walking away. And now you want to come back, to be part of our lives, as if you didn't destroy everything?" Daniel fell silent, his eyes wide and wet with tears. But Emily no longer cared. His regret, his sorrow, it meant nothing to her. It couldn't erase what he had done. "I don't need you anymore, Daniel," Emily said, her voice suddenly calm, resolute. "I've spent years rebuilding my life. I've raised our children without you. I've made a home, a real home, where they're safe. I've become stronger because of what you did. And I will never, ever let you back into that home. You don't deserve to be part of their lives." Daniel's shoulders slumped in defeat. The fight had gone out of him, and for the first time he truly looked broken. But Emily didn't feel the satisfaction she had once imagined. She just felt free. "I'll leave," Daniel murmured, his voice barely audible. "I'll leave you all alone. I just wanted to see them, to apologize." "You should have thought about that before you abandoned us," Emily replied, her voice cold. "It's too late now, and I'm going to make sure you can never hurt us again." Without waiting for his response, Emily pulled her phone from her pocket and dialed the number she had memorized long ago. The police. She had made the call countless times before, reporting his harassment, his threats. But this time, things were different. This time, Daniel was standing right in front of her, and this time, she was ready to take action. Daniel looked up in alarm as Emily spoke calmly into the phone. "Hello. I need to report a man who has been harassing me and my children for years. He's here right now at my home." There was no hesitation in her voice, no wavering. Emily was in control now. Within minutes, the sound of sirens echoed in the distance, growing louder as they approached the house. Daniel's eyes darted toward the door, panic flashing across his face. "Emily, please," he began, but she cut him off once again. "You brought this on yourself, Daniel," she said firmly. "You thought you could keep getting away with it, that I'd never stand up to you. But I'm done letting you control my life. You're going to face the consequences now." As the police arrived, Daniel tried to plead with her one last time, his voice frantic. "I'm sorry, Emily. I really am. I don't want to go to jail." But Emily stood tall, her face expressionless. "You should have thought of that before you tried to destroy everything I built." The officers moved in swiftly, cuffing Daniel and reading him his rights. He didn't struggle. He was too broken, too defeated. As they led him out the door, Emily watched in silence. Her heart pounded in her chest, but she didn't look away. She couldn't. This was the closure she had waited for, the moment she had dreamed of in her darkest hours. Daniel turned to look at her one last time as he was guided to the police car. But Emily didn't waver. She stood firm, resolute, as the man who had haunted her life was taken away. As the police car drove away, a strange calm settled over Emily. For the first time in years, the weight that had been crushing her chest finally lifted. The fear, the anxiety, the lingering terror that Daniel would come back, it was all gone. She had stood up to him. She had fought back. Emily closed the door behind her, leaning against it for a moment as the reality of the situation set in. She had done it. She had protected her children, protected herself. She had taken back her life. Margaret appeared in the hallway, her face filled with quiet pride. "You did the right thing," she said softly, placing a comforting hand on Emily's shoulder. Emily nodded, feeling a wave of relief wash over her. "I know," she whispered. "I just wish it hadn't come to this." "It's over now," Margaret reassured her. "You're free." Emily smiled faintly, the words sinking in. For the first time in years, she truly believed them. As she walked upstairs to check on the triplets, Emily felt a sense of peace she hadn't felt in a long, long time. The shadows of her past no longer haunted her. Daniel was gone, and she was stronger than she had ever imagined. The road had been long and painful, but Emily had come out the other side. Stronger, wiser, and unbreakable. The sun filtered gently through the sheer curtains of Emily's living room, casting a warm, golden glow over the space that now felt like a sanctuary, a far cry from the days when every shadow seemed like a looming threat. The soft sounds of laughter floated in from the backyard, where the triplets were playing, their carefree giggles filling the air with a sense of lightness Emily hadn't felt in years. It had only been a few weeks since Daniel had been arrested, but already, the atmosphere in their home had changed. The weight that had once pressed down on her shoulders had lifted, replaced by a quiet peace that settled into every corner of her heart. Emily stood by the window, watching her children run through the grass, their faces flushed with joy as they chased each other with water balloons. For the first time in a long time, she smiled, a real, unguarded smile. Her beautiful children, Jason, Anna, and Leo, were the embodiment of everything she had fought for. Each of them was a living, breathing reminder of her resilience, her strength, and the battle she had won. As she watched them play, their laughter echoing in the yard, Emily felt a deep sense of pride swell in her chest. They had survived. They had all survived. The years of fear, anxiety, and uncertainty seemed like a distant memory now. There had been days when she thought she would never escape Daniel's shadow, when it felt like no matter how far she ran, he would always find a way to pull her back. But that chapter of her life was finally over. Daniel was gone, this time for good, and she had no intention of ever looking back. Emily's thoughts drifted to the past, but instead of the usual pang of regret or bitterness, she felt a strange sense of calm. The journey she had been on was long and painful, filled with moments of hopelessness and fear, but it had shaped her into the woman she was today. She had been forced to confront her deepest vulnerabilities, to stand up against the man who had once controlled her life, and she had come out the other side stronger than ever. There were still scars, of course, emotional wounds that would take time to heal fully, but she had learned to embrace those scars as part of her story, part of what had made her who she was. And while the memories of Daniel's betrayal and the years of terror still lingered at the edges of her mind, they no longer held power over her. She had reclaimed her life, her freedom, and most importantly, her sense of self. Emily had also begun to focus more on her own needs and desires. For so long she had lived in survival mode, every decision driven by the need to protect her children. But now, with the threat of Daniel removed, she had room to breathe again, to dream again. She had started taking walks in the mornings, reading books she had long neglected, and spending time with her mother, Margaret, who had been her rock through it all. Margaret, too, had noticed the change in her daughter. "You look lighter," she had remarked one evening over dinner, a twinkle of pride in her eyes. "Like you're finally free." Emily had simply smiled, but the truth was, she did feel lighter. For years, she had carried the burden of Daniel's actions, the guilt and shame of a failed marriage, and the constant fear that he would come back. But now, those burdens had lifted, and Emily was ready to move forward, to live a life free from the shadows of her past. As Emily watched the triplets continue their game, her heart swelled with love. Jason, the oldest by mere minutes, had taken on the role of the protector, always watching out for his siblings. Anna, full of creativity and imagination, was already drawing pictures in chalk on the patio, her artwork as vibrant as her personality. And Leo, the youngest and most adventurous, was climbing a tree, calling out to his brother and sister to join him. They had grown so much, these little people she had fought so hard to protect. And despite the turmoil that had surrounded their early years, they had blossomed into kind, thoughtful, and joyful children. They didn't carry the weight of the past like Emily did. They had their whole lives ahead of them, and Emily was determined to ensure that those lives would be full of happiness, love, and opportunity. There would come a day when she would sit them down and tell them the truth about their father. She would explain the complexities of his choices, the reasons why he had left, and why he had never come back. But that day wasn't today. For now they were innocent, blissfully unaware of the darkness that had once threatened to consume their lives. And Emily was content to let them stay that way. They didn't need to know the full extent of Daniel's cruelty just yet. They didn't need to know how he had nearly torn their family apart with his lies, his abandonment, and his threats. That truth could wait until they were older, until they could fully understand the strength it had taken their mother to protect them from him. For now, all that mattered was that they were happy, healthy, and safe, and that to Emily was everything. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the yard, Emily called the children inside for dinner. They came running, laughing and breathless from their game, their faces lit up with the carefree joy that only childhood could bring. Emily's heart swelled as she ushered them into the house, feeling the warmth of their presence fill the space. Margaret had already set the table, and as they sat down to eat, Emily felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude wash over her. This was what she had fought for, this moment, this life. A life free from fear, a life where her children could thrive without the looming presence of Daniel hanging over them. As they ate, the conversation flowed easily, filled with stories from the children's day and plans for the weekend ahead. Emily listened, smiling softly, as Jason talked about a school project. Anna shared her latest drawing idea, and Leo excitedly recounted his tree-climbing adventure. Their voices were like music to her ears, a reminder of everything she had gained in the face of so much loss. Later, as she tucked them into bed, Emily lingered in the doorway, watching them sleep. The house was quiet, the peace she had worked so hard to achieve finally settling around her like a comforting blanket. She knew there would still be challenges ahead. Life was never without its hardships. But for the first time in years, Emily felt ready to face whatever came next. She was no longer the woman Daniel had abandoned. She was no longer the scared mother who had feared for her children's safety. She was strong, she was resilient, and she had built a life that no one, not even Daniel, could ever take away from her. As Emily turned off the lights and headed to her own room, she felt a quiet sense of triumph. The road ahead was bright, full of new possibilities, and she would walk it with her head held high, knowing that she had not only survived but thrived. It was a new beginning, and this time it was on her terms. Who would have thought Daniel had such a dark secret? And what would you have done in Emily's place? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more gripping stories like this one. See you in the next video.